Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to vlog 139, Social Justice Methodologies. And yes, this vlog is the ending vlog in our Social Justice Quartet, and thank you so much for hanging with me through this journey. It's been amazing, emotional, moving, confronting, disturbing, but I would argue fabulous. And I want to thank every single one of you out there, and there are probably thousands at this point, who have contacted me through some mode of social media or email to say hi and to tell me your story. And they're very precious stories, and I thank you for sharing them with me. Thank you. But needless to say, we've got a rather big bang of an ending rather than a whimper, and I think it's quite appropriate that we finish with methodologies. And I've had a lot of requests, not only sort of in the social justice rubric, but a whole series of requests to go back and return to methodologies, and particularly how we create social change through methodologies. And the requests I've got from students and our wonderful friends around the world have used all sorts of different languages and phrases. And I loved Liza's phrase. She asked to have a vlog from me on, quote, transformative research methods and social justice philosophies, end of quote. Isn't that a fantastic phrase? So Liza, I'm going to try and deliver on that enormous big project today, and everybody else that's interested in sort of the edgy interventionist methodologies, and really pondering, I suppose, what we're meant to be doing in universities right now. So it seems appropriate at the end of this social justice quartet that we do actually stop at methodologies. What are we doing? But before I add social justice as an adjective to the noun methodologies, let's just do a 25-second introduction to methodologies. And as you might remember, we did a whole vlog on methodologies. It was part of our Three Wise Monkeys series by memory, and again, that's been incredibly well supported. But let's just do sort of 15 seconds on what is a methodology. So you can put this on a post-it note and whack it on your computer. So methodologies are the theoretical analyses of methods, and particularly the methods that are deployed in a specific field or specific discipline. So it's reflexive about what is best practice, what is assumed practice in a particular paradigm or discipline. And what methodologies do is they provide the rationale, the framework, the foundation for the selection of methods. So yes, methodologies are research strategies. That's what you can write on the post-it note. They are research strategies. Methods are the how. Methodologies are the why of the how, why you are doing those methods. Hope that helps. So right, let's now add the social justice adjective to the front of that noun. And let's start with a truth. Let's start with a reality, shall we? And that is, a lot of research can be profoundly unjust. A lot of research can be abusive. And even more disturbingly, a lot of research, and to be frank, I would argue most research, reinforces the status quo. The nature of funding and grant models is that we are funded to do research that reinforces the status quo in our culture, and therefore it can actually reinforce existing inequalities. Deep truth, something for you to consider. So therefore, social justice methodologies ask us to do something different, to be responsible for how that research is conducted, but also responsible with how that research travels, how your research outcomes, your conclusions are used and deployed, and how they iteratively return back to the men and women that you used, deployed as participants. So Linda Tahawi Smith believed, and I love this, that social justice methodologies ask us to reflect on the space between the researcher and the researched. That's really what social justice methodologies are. This is us, this is them. Isn't that interesting language in and of itself? But there is space between us. And social justice methodologies ask that we really do think about that space. Now, this is a really exciting area. Social justice methodologies, big, really big, internationally big, and expanding. So if this is something you're interested in, you can dip very deeply into this and you can have a career, a sustainable career, looking at these ideas. And I've read two of the best books I've read this year. I've read a lot of fantastic books this year. And two of the best books I've read this year are actually on social justice methodologies. Firstly, Oh, We Are Not Worthy, Michelle Fine's Just Research in Contentious Times. Wow, widening the methodological imagination. How fantastic is that? Just research and widening the methodological imagination. My life changed. I thought differently about the world when I finished that book. The best books do that to you. You read it, you go, wow, okay, I'm a different person than I was when I started reading this book. Michelle Fine, We Are Not Worthy, what a legend. And also Andrew Jolivet's Research Justice, Methodologies for Social Change. Fascinating edited collection. Really enjoyed that too. A little bit more perhaps textbooky, but again, the chapters were profound and interesting and strong. And perhaps with a how-to guide, start there first and then move to Michelle Fine. Now, I recommend both these books, whatever your discipline. They are inspirational in terms of high quality research, so that's fantastic. So let's now dip into this a little bit more deeply. What are the characteristics of social justice methodologies? Well, the first variable is that they are interventionist. They are interventionist. They operate through all disciplines, and this is really significant, from the art-led research, so art-based practice, right the way through to engineering. So these methodologies that I'm talking about today operate throughout the parameters of knowledge. Now, obviously, the key and really nuggety interventions occur in social science, in the middle, obviously, applied social science, empirical social science, and I hope theoretical social science as well. And you simply can't have social work research, you can't have socio-legal research without social justice methodologies, okay? So challenging epistemology is crucial. So again, the vlog today, I could have focused nice and strongly on the social sciences. I could have done that today, but you know what? I'm not going to do that because that's too easy. So in the examples I'm going to choose and talk about today, I'm going to use the extreme ends. So art-led practice and yes, engineering. Okay, so one of the clearest definitions of social justice methodologies that I've come across was published in 2005 by Clark and Hollander. And they argued that social justice methodologies had two particular characteristics. Firstly, the data set must be configured in a deliberate fashion. Now, I love that. I'd use the word reflexive fashion, but deliberate fashion. So in other words, we are gathering this data set and we are going to think very strongly about how we are configuring this data set, rather than simply going, oh, look, let's just get some data and whack it into our research. How are we actually going to do this? So that's important. Deliberate configurations of a data set. And secondly, and I love this one, the group impacted by the findings must be aware of it and able to use it. Now, doesn't that sort of change everything? And it makes a clear point about the significance of the open access journals and the open access movement. So if you've got your research locked behind a paywall, then you can't have social justice methodologies because the people you're talking about that could gain from the research can't read it. Something to think about. So social justice methodologies explore the factors that are both personal and contextual that impact on populations that are confronting social injustice, so are confronting inequalities. So if you will, social justice methodologies question us, question researchers, question the professionalisation of research, and interrogate how particular definitions of truth displace and deny other readings. So we focus on the process of conducting research, yes, the ideas that shape that research, and the impact of it. See, I told you it would change everything. It sort of does. So as you can see, there is a political purpose to research, And that political purpose is overt. It's not hidden, it's not an assumption, it's not a vibe, it's not hinted in the conclusions, it's overt and it's upfront. And we discuss not only how knowledge is created, but how that knowledge can transform the world in some way. So Brown and Streger described it as, quote, research from, by, and with the margins, end of quote. Wow, isn't this fantastic stuff? So it asks us all to question our biases, and those biases, even if you don't admit them, it's important you admit them, because our biases undergird our research. And all of us carry assumptions about equality and inequality, and whatever discipline, that impacts on the work that we do. So the easiest example of this I can use when we think about social justice methodologies is when we present questionnaires in a particular language. When we present questionnaires in a particular language, we assume that the people that are going to fill in those questionnaires share that language. And so if you think about it, for my colleagues in allied health, when we're working with Indigenous communities where English is a second language, or perhaps a third, and we are conducting that research in English, think about the consequences of that. What are we suggesting? What are we stating about those Indigenous men and women? So if you think about it, most research that we do starts with the researcher's needs rather than the context of the research or the context of our subjects. So we start, to be brutally frank, with what we need. I'm a researcher, this is what my research needs. I'm going to do some questionnaires, I'm going to do some surveys, social science, see what's happening, and I'm going to send those out to that population, and I'm going to get my data set and I'm going to write that up. Now, we haven't thought for one moment about the consequences of that questionnaire on that population, the language they speak, the context in which they live. So what does all of this mean? Well, if we want to make a difference, okay, if you want to today go, okay, look, I'm interested in this, but how do I action this in my research, whatever the discipline? Let me tell you, there are 4 things you can do today to implement social justice methodologies. 4. Reflect on the initial assumptions that configured your research questions. I'll say that again because it's so important. Reflect on the assumptions that created your research questions. Okay, so don't just go, here are my research questions, thanks for playing. Be really reflexive and write the argument about how you ended up with those research questions. 2, before selecting methods for data collection, consider the type of data that cannot be collected through those methods. Now that's really important. So let me use a really easy example. Say you're investigating parliamentary documents. That's great, that's an important data set, very significant. But you're not going to get working class histories through an investigation of parliamentary documents. So that's your source material. Who are you leaving out through that selection? That's the second one. 3, when applying your analysis and your interpretation, you have to be aware of your researcher's lens going in. So when you're about to do your analysis, your interpretation, be really aware, what's my lens going in? And the way you prove and really work with that lens is you come up with, you know what, here are 4 or 5 other lenses that exist that could operate on that data set. So by going, this is mine, that's fine, that's one step, that's reflexive research, that's great. But what social justice methodologies do is say, right, well, find some other lenses and think about what they would offer and write that as well. And 4, consider how your conclusions and your implications have been presented. So what's your conclusion? And just ask yourself, were there other trajectories and conclusions that you could have selected and for some reason you did not? So as you can see, social justice methodologies question the very foundation of our research, and isn't this incredibly exciting? And what social justice methodologies do is they place our research in context. But most importantly, I think, social justice methodologies demand that we move outside of our context as a scholar, as a researcher, and consider the context of our participants, of our subjects. Now, if you're working in the arts or the arts-based disciplines, the role, I would argue, of art is to use art to critique and question the inequalities in culture and society, and through art-based practice encourage people to see the world differently. Now, I would argue, particularly in Australia, a lot of art-based practice has this cultural value still that's in place. I thought cultural value has been critiqued for the last 25 years, but that's a whole other vlog. But the notion that art is, oh yes, well, art is ennobling, art is enlivening, and if we just listen to particular music or read particular books, we become a better person. Well, that's a class-based bias. It's a class-based bias. So therefore, what arts-based practice should do is think about how diverse modes of cultural value can inflect and inform what we do. Great example, of course, is photo voice or photo voce, and that's a great example of a socially just methodology. So photo voice is participant photography. So it's not me taking a picture of those people over there. It's me saying, here is a camera, and I am going to hand that camera over to these people, and they are going to document and photograph their own life on their own terms. So this enables disempowered or marginalised men and women to document their experience within their context. So when we hear about the co-creation of research, that's becoming a very big word and phrase at the moment, the co-creation of research, photo voice is a great example of that. So that's the stuff over here, that's the arts-based practice. But I promised you, for my wonderful men and women in engineering, and you know I have an incredible soft spot for engineers, when I was at university, I actually used to sit in engineering lectures, particularly when I was growing up in my teens and early 20s. Environmental engineering as a subdiscipline was just being formed, and you know, a lot of those lectures at the University of Western Australia that I sat in really changed my life. So I've got an incredible soft spot, as you know, for our men and women in engineering. And in engineering, some amazing work has occurred in the last decade in particular. Incredible work on methodologies. And Donna Riley, that woman should be given a prize. Donna Riley is one of the great scholars in this world, and she has been a leader in engineering social justice methodologies. And she argued that engineering as a profession, and she argued particularly in the United States, can I say, has served the status quo. And particularly she argued that it invoked materialistic and militaristic intentions. So she argued for the incredible value of engineers gaining a diversity of methodological expertise in critical thinking, yes, but also in summoning actions for change. And I recommend her remarkable book. Yes, an engineer produced a book. Come on, Donna. Produced a remarkable book published in 2008 titled Engineering and Social Justice, Synthesis Lectures on Engineers, Technology and Society. Again, I read that book, changed my life. One of those books, I read it. I was a different person when I finished it. Donna Riley, she's a legend. And what I've done in prep for this vlog this week, so obviously I read this book a decade ago, but I've followed the citations of that wonderful book in the subsequent decade. And it's a great example of that one woman's book has changed a discipline. The citations are simply remarkable. And her research has summoned a different type of disciplinary plurality within not only engineering, but the STEM disciplines more generally. And she really showed, as her followers have shown, that what makes engineering so spectacular, which is that evidence, that gritty evidence, and the rigour of engineering research, that can be used in social justice paradigms. Very powerful. And the impact, has continued, of Riley's work has continued through the last decade. And I particularly want to summon an article that I read this week by Mark Higgins, Maria Wallace and Jessie Bazul in the Canadian Journal of Science, Mathematics and Technology Education. A great journal, can I say? I read the journal a lot, but this article is stellar, and they focus on the how we create these social justice methodologies in STEM, and they spend a lot of attention on research design. So I really recommend that article to you. So as you can see, I've been hard on myself. Whether you're choosing the arts-based research or engineering, social justice methodologies demand more of us as scholars, more of us as researchers, and yes, I'm going to use the word again, more of us as intellectuals. We have to agitate our power that objectifies our research participants, our research subjects, and we have to try and stop restricting the lived experience and the context of the men and women that we study. The legendary Michelle Fine, wow, what an amazing scholar, asked that we, quote, trace the biography of our research questions, end of quote. Trace the biography of our research questions. I've been thinking about that this week. That statement has changed my life. That is just, if you think about that, that changes the way in which we come up with research questions and research. Amazing. And that might be a pivotal moment for you to consider how the entirety of your research is configured. So when you ask one set of research questions, what are you not asking? And what are the consequences of not asking those questions? Also, look at your footnotes, or indeed the force of darkness in the culture, Harvard referencing. I won't even get into that, but hopefully you're looking at your footnotes, but if you're using Harvard, bless you, good luck with that. But when you're looking at your citations, really look at the type of source material that you are citing. What sort of genre of research materials are you citing? And what are you not citing? And what are the consequences of that? Because if you think about it, you know, some stuff, plenty of stuff exists out there, plenty of material and evidence exists out there, you're not citing that. Why? And of course there are the topics where there are absences or gaps or silences in the story. There's actually no evidence we can actually cite. So how do we research the silences? How do we research the gap? Now, for example, women's history, social history, oral history, popular cultural history try to configure new ways of thinking about evidence to return social justice to an evidential base. And of course, we've never had more evidence for anything than we have right now. We have tweets, we have Facebook posts, we have YouTube videos, we have Instagram, we have all these different sources. But have you got the methodological expertise to actually work with these sources? Or because you don't have the methodologies, you simply ignore them? And the issue is, when you're ignoring those sources, what groups of people are you simply ignoring? And therefore I wanted to finish this vlog with a statement, a quote that changed my life when I was 19 years of age. I remember where I was, I remember the time of day, I remember everything about the moment I was reading this book and I read this quotation, and probably everything in terms of my research, my teaching, my life, what I believe in, came from this quote that I read when I was 19. And it was from Greil Marcus's Lipstick Traces, A Secret History of the 20th Century. And Marcus asked, quote, "What is history anyway? Is history simply a matter of those moments that leave behind those things that can be weighed and measured? New institutions, new winners, new losers? Or is history also a matter of those moments that seem to leave nothing behind? Nothing but the mystery of spectral connections between people long separated by place and time? If the language they are speaking, the impulse they are voicing, has its own history, might it not tell a very different story from the one we've been hearing all our lives?" End of quote. So Marcus was talking about history there, but every single discipline could be provoked by his argument. What is criminology anyway? What is physics anyway? What is economics anyway? And when we answer those really tough questions, everything changes. We think about evidence, we think about rigour, we think about transparency in a different way, and we think about the role of the participants, not only in your research, but how that research is disseminated. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.